Hi, it's Vicki with Doing What's Next. And what's next is looking at some storms that are forecasted to happen tonight and tomorrow. So I thought I would take this opportunity to talk about a time in my life where I had really high anxiety around storms and how taking the NOAA Skywarn Spotter class kind of helped me get through some of that. So back in, as a child, my dad was a big weather watcher, and this is in the early 60s and 70s when we had a black and white TV. Storms, the radar would come up, the old black and white radar, and he would draw on the TV where the front of the storm was. And the next time the radar came up, he'd draw again, and he'd get an idea of how the storm was progressing through that. So from an early childhood, watching storms was something that was part of my life with my dad. And I continued that, and I began watching live storm chases, the storm chasers back in the early, like around 2015 and such. But also around that time, I began to have a lot of anxiety around not only storms, but a lot of other things going on at that time. And for storms, I would see the forecast for them, and if they were at night, I would not want to go to sleep, no matter, even if they said it wasn't a big storm. It's going to be tornadic. It wouldn't be tornadic, it's just a big storm. I would still stay up. I could not fall asleep. And so I wasn't getting a lot of sleep in the summer and such. And it was such, I got to a point where even if the storm was during the day and I was at work, I would much rather have been at home, and I really wanted to go home for a storm and not be at the office. And I knew it was anxiety and stress. It was, wasn't anything like the storm would treat me any different being at work or at home. And then in the spring of 2016, I had heard about the Skywarn Spotter program. And I signed up for the class and took the class. It was a 4-hour class. And something in that class, I don't know exactly what it was, but it flipped a switch in my head and helped me begin to realize that, there is a difference between storms. Here's what to look for on the radar, which now, obviously we have much better radar and they're on our phones and such. And I got to a point where I could say, okay, I know this storm is not projected to be tornadic. Here are the things they're telling me, and I'm seeing them, and it allowed me to feel more comfortable, to be able to fall asleep and trust my weather radio, which I'd always had, and I just stopped trusting it to wake me up, and I was able to begin to do that again. So I got sleep, storms didn't stress me out as much at work, etc. I even began then to go out and not exactly chase storms, but I'd go out to watch them. I am not a trained meteorologist, not even close, and I was out by myself, so I didn't have someone to help me navigate. So I did my best to stay far away and just see the structures from a distance. And that was a lot of fun to be able to go out and do, and to see the things I'd learned in the class. Now the class I have kept up with. Every 2 years you have to go back in to get re-registered for it and take the class. And I'm very thankful for that class, and I'm glad to be able to do it. I've even had the opportunity, once there was a storm in our neighborhood, and it really took off the siding of my neighbor's house, and a lot of tree damage, but just on that one side. And I was able to report it. They came out and were able to say that it was straight line winds that kind of hit down on the main road, so that was cool. I've reported hail sizes, etc. And such. Now, have you ever thought about doing the program? You should look into it. Even if just to educate yourself. The class is 4 hours. It's not intense. It does have a little bit where you kind of stare at the screen and go, okay, I see what they're talking about. Here's the difference of the wall cloud versus a shelf cloud, and I kind of see what they're talking about, but you start to get it. And they have materials that are there to help you and tell you what to look for, and most importantly, they're telling you how to report it. And why that's important is because if you think about radars, they're going up at an angle, and people are on the ground and can see things differently than the radar. So if you're 60 miles away from the radar site, that radar is seeing, thousands of feet up in the air. It can't see what's going on closer to the ground. Where weather spotters are those who then are on the ground, can see it and report it. Have you ever heard a weather emergency radio goes off and they tell you that the storm is radar indicated or seen by a trained storm spotter? Which one have you believed more? And they found that over time, people really take to heart the tornado warnings much better if it says it's from a trained spotter versus just radar indicated. So spotters are needed out there, and really what you do is you just do it from your own home. You're not like heading out to go do it anywhere. There are people who do that, and they're part of a ham radio network and a little more intense with it. But for what I do, I just mainly watch it from home and such. Now I did with the chasing, as I sort of call it, I was able to see a few of them from a distance, very far distance, but it's got to see them, the structure, and see the tornado forming, etc. And then once I was out up in northern Minnesota, and I was able to get fairly close to a rain-wrapped tornado. And I felt comfortable enough with it because it was going in the other direction, and I had a very quick way to get onto the freeway and drive completely opposite. Now obviously I couldn't see the tornado because it was rain wrapped, but I could see the structure and that. So it was a really fun day to be able to actually go see some of the things I've talked about, or we talked about in the class, and etc. In that. And then there have been other times where I've been out driving, and I'll drive parallel to a storm and see the structures, and that, again, being a safe distance from it, watching which way it's going so that I am not in the path of the storm. So as we get ready for the storms that are coming tonight, I like to make sure that my prep stuff is ready. My emergency radio, the battery is been changed out or is in good shape, and I have a backup one, emergency radio as well. And you can rely on your phones in today's technology, but it's still best in case a tower goes out or something happens to still have a weather radio in your home. It's very, very important to help with safety, especially it's very loud when it goes off, and it should wake most people up in the middle of the night and such. So I make sure that's ready. The safe spot in our home in the lower level, I make sure it's ready to fit everybody in the house, including the animals, in case we had to go down there and, for the storm, if it got too intense in our area. I make sure that I have some supplies set aside in case something does happen. If something were to happen and the house got hit and we had to be kind of stuck in that space for a little while, do we have some water with us? And do I have my shoes so that if I had to exit the space and there's splintered wood, I have shoes on? So I kind of I look at the extreme scenario of if something major happened, do I have some supplies ready for that? But the short term, kind of just the simple stuff is, do I have some water? Do I have toilet paper? Do I have food, a little bit of food, snack, protein bars or snacks just in case, and candles, or nowadays just kind of flashlights and that are charged. I make sure my phone is charged. I make sure all the charging devices that we have are charged in case the power does go out. And so I do some prepping for a storm like that. But again, I do it so that I know I'm comfortable when it's time to happen. I have some things in place. And I will do another video coming up that talks about some of the other prepping I do. I'm not like a deep, intense, prepper, the end of the world's coming, but I do like to have some things set aside in case of emergencies. If you take, for example, the ice storm in Texas a few years ago, that kind of threw a lot of people off. And that's a good example of why it's important to have a few things set aside for prepping from a prepper standpoint, or preparedness, because prepper can be a bad word at times. So time for me to go get my 15th walk in 15 days done, and then get home and make sure everything's ready. Stay safe and prepared.